Welcome to the final module of CIS 75, module 15. Here is the final picture of the week to Dilbert Comics. This final chapter is all about the boring stuff. None of the fun technical stuff. This is all about risk, managing your risk. We talked about this at the very beginning, but this is essentially how we get paid. This is how we justify our existence. Being able to manage risks. There are different threat categories that we need to be aware of. There are the strategic, the actions that affect long-term goals of the organization, compliance, following or not following a regulation or standard, financial, the impact of financial decisions or market factors, the operational, the events that impact the daily business of the organization, the technical, which we have spent most of the semester on, and the managerial. Once threats to assets are determined, we must look at the risk these assets face. Testing is identifying vulnerabilities. This can be done by means such as penetration testing, which should have legal authorization before conducting. Modifications to a system, such as new equipment, parts, devices, etc., should be kept track using change management. Data should be classified depending on the sensitivity of the information. The government uses secret or top secret, secret, confidential, and unclassified. A change in these should be recorded. Privilege management is the process to periodically review user privileges to objects. And incident management, which we talked about in a prior module, is part of this process and was discussed earlier. Risk calculation. These two equations show up in the Security Plus exam. An organization that can accurately calculate risk is better prepared to address the risk. Two approaches to this are the qualitative risk and the quantitative risk. In qualitative, we use an educated guess based on observations, ranking the frequency of attacks from high risk to low risk with a numerical value of like 1 to 10 or a label, high, medium, low. In quantitative, we use the likelihood and impact of a risk being successful. Here are terms that you need to know. The risk likelihood is calculated by the mean time between failures, or the MTFB, the mean time to recovery, the MTTR, the mean time to failure, MTTF, and the failure in time. This data can be used to determine the annual rate of occurrence, OARO. I'm going to repeat that because it shows up on the test. The risk likelihood is calculated, and what these terms mean you will find in the notes. The mean time between failures, the mean time to recovery, the mean time to failure, and the failure in time, along with the annualized rate of occurrence. Those acronyms you need to know because they will show up. Risk impact is done by comparing impact to monetary loss with an asset to determine the cost that represents how much money would be lost if the risk occurred. There are 3 variables that you need for this: the ARO, the annualized rate of occurrence, the asset value, and the exposure factor. This important calculation that you need to know is called the single loss of expectancy. For example, if a building with a value of $10 million, of which 75% is likely to be destroyed in a tornado, that means the SLE is $7.5 million. That would be the single loss expectancy for a $10 million building where we know 75% of it will likely be destroyed. The annual loss expectancy, ALE, is the expected monetary loss in a 1-year period. It is calculated like this. Take the single loss expectancy, multiply it by the annualized rate of occurrence to get the annual loss expectancy. For example, if a flood insurance data suggests that a serious flood is likely to occur 1 in 100 years, then our ARO is 0.01 or 1 in 100. The ALE will be calculated like this. So the ALE would be $75,000. These terms are important because we're talking about money. We're talking the language of those who hold the money. Being able to quantify our risk in dollars will speak to those in upper management. Because we can talk all day about the vulnerabilities and the impacts of having Telnet on and why it should be turned off. That makes no sense whatsoever to a board of directors, to upper management. But it does make sense to say if Telnet remains on, we could be losing $7.5 million a year. That's just going to click in them. So being able to use those terms, the mean time between failure, the mean time to recovery, the mean time between failure in time, the annualized rate of occurrence, the single loss expectancy, and being able to show these calculations will make you effective in bringing your point of reducing the technical risk to a company. Another way that you can represent risk is using things like these risk registers, matrices, and so on. Yes, part of your job is going to be to talk about these highly complex things by using kindergarten level stuff. We're using colors: green, yellow, orange, and red. That is very elementary. A child would understand. That's kind of the point. Being able to talk about everything we've covered in this entire semester, being able to talk about it to upper management in a way that they will nod and understand may require taking all of that technical knowledge and turning it into a little kindergarten thing. But whatever works. Your strategies for reducing risk. Risk can be reduced by a number of security controls. Here are some. The administrative. Developing and ensuring policies and procedures that are carried out by users. Action users may do, must do, and cannot do. That is first and foremost because, as you've heard me say throughout this whole semester, the humans are the weakest link. And you could have the best security, but all it takes is one user to screw all that up. Next is deterrent, discouraging security violations before they occur. Preventative, preventing the threat from coming in contact with the vulnerability. Physical, security in a defined structure and location. Detective, identify any threat that has reached the system. Compensating, provides an alternative to normal controls that for some reason cannot be used. And corrective, mitigate damage caused by the incident. Risk can also be distributed or spread through transference, risk avoidance, and mitigation. Terms, again, that you need to be familiar with when you go and take the test. Transference would be something like using insurance. Risk avoidance would be like turning off a service. Mitigation would be addressing it by making it less serious. Technology can help with change and reducing risk, for example, through automation. Devices can self-act, operate, heal, and regulate without user interaction. Automation allows for scalability and elasticity. Furthermore, making templates and master copies of systems will ensure, should something go wrong, because it's never an if, with a particular device, we can restore it to an operational state. Some practices for reducing risk. A policy is a document that outlines specific requirements or rules that must be met. A standard is a collection of requirements specific to the system or a procedure that must be met by everyone. A guideline, a collection of suggestions that should be implemented, but they cannot be enforced. These policies are found in most places: the acceptable use policy, the personal email, and the social media policy. Of the key defenses against threats is a continuous security awareness and training. All users need to be continuously trained in the new security defenses and reminded of a company security policy and procedure. Some ideal opportunities for this can be when a new employee is hired, after a computer attack occurred, when an employee is promoted or given new responsibilities, annual department retreat, new software installed, or new hardware upgraded. Agreements are formal contractual relationships as they relate to security policy and procedures. Professionals should be acquainted with service level agreements, or SLAs, blanket purchase agreements, BPA, memorandum of understanding, MOU, interconnection security agreement, and non-disclosure agreements. Risk can be reduced by having procedures that affect the hiring and termination of personnel, such as background checks and exit interviews. So as you have seen throughout this entire course, security professionals should have the knowledge to troubleshoot common security issues, such as access violations, asset management, authentication issues, baseline deviations, certificate issues, data exfiltration, license compliant violation, logs and event anomalies, misconfigured devices, permission issues, personnel issues, social media, social engineering, insider threats, unauthorized software, unencrypted credentials, and weak security configurations. That is all the stuff that we have talked about throughout these last 15 weeks. All the things that are expected of an entry-level cybersecurity professional with the Security Plus certification. Are there any questions? I see no questions. So this final week, I do not have an assignment for you to do in the modules for module 15. I instead have linked the practice questions again, if you are planning on taking the 501. The Sans Ouch newsletter, which is a great resource to share when it comes to awareness and training for normal users. It has very layman's terms. It's like a 2-pager monthly newsletter that you can share with others. It doesn't require technical knowledge. It does a great job of covering vital topics. There is a quiz to cover this chapter, but otherwise, you don't really have anything due for this week other than finishing up your what do I call it? Their final project, the CTF, submitting your entry for your Pacific Hackers meetings and OWASP meetings, and turning in any assignments before that dreaded due until date. To remind you, as I've said throughout this entire course, you are able to submit any assignments until the due until date. When that day strikes, I will not accept any work. So you have about a week now to complete all assignments and get them turned in before that due until date. If you are planning on taking the Security Plus, I need to know ahead of time before this week is over that you're taking it. If you are going to take it, I would highly suggest do it before this class is all over. That way I can give you the grade before I have to turn them in and make it all official. Otherwise, I hope you guys have a great winter break. Discord will be available. I will turn the current category into an archive, but feel free to ask away or follow me on Twitter or both, either whichever one suits you best. If there are no other questions, I will end this recording and the stream.